The most common mistake tourists make in Kenya happens before they leave home, in the moment they decide what kind of trip a safari is. The mental model most Western travelers bring to Kenya is essentially the model of a theme park. You pay an entry fee, you go to the designated area, the animals are there, you see them, you photograph them, you check the boxes. The big five: lion, leopard, elephant, buffalo, rhino. The wildebeest migration. The cheetah on the termite mound at golden hour. These are the deliverables, and the trip is successful if they've been delivered and unsuccessful if they haven't. In the same way a theme park visit succeeds if the rides are open and fails if they're closed. This model is not just limiting. It's structurally incompatible with what a genuine safari actually is, and arriving in Kenya with it produces a specific and consistent kind of disappointment that has nothing to do with the country and everything to do with the expectation. A real safari, the thing that Kenya has to offer in its most powerful form, is an experience of radical presence in an ecosystem that operates entirely outside your preferences and entirely outside your schedule. The animals move according to their own logic, which is the logic of predator and prey and water and grass and heat, and that logic has no awareness of your itinerary or your photography list or the number of days you've allocated for the experience. You may drive for 4 hours and see nothing except landscape, and the landscape is extraordinary, and the nothing you saw was the safari. You may round a corner and encounter a pride of lions with a kill and spend an hour watching something that no photograph will adequately capture. Both of these are the safari. Neither of them is controllable. The tourist who understands this arrives capable of receiving whatever the ecosystem offers. The one who doesn't spends the game drives leaning forward with the list in their head and comes home saying they didn't see enough. The guide is the single most consequential variable in a Kenyan safari, and it's the variable most travelers spend the least time evaluating before they book. A great guide in Kenya is not a driver who knows the park roads. It's someone who reads the grass, who notices the direction the zebras are looking, who understands that the unusual behavior of the oxpeckers in that thicket means something specific, who has been watching this ecosystem long enough to know that the lion they tracked last week denayed somewhere in this corridor, and that the paw prints in the road this morning suggest she came through 2 hours ago. The difference between a guide who operates at this level and one who follows the radio chatter between vehicles to arrive at whatever crowd has gathered around an animal, the standard operating procedure of the mass safari circuit, is the difference between encountering the ecosystem and spectating at a wildlife show. Great guides exist in Kenya in significant numbers, and they are disproportionately concentrated in the private conservancies rather than in the public parks, for reasons that become clear when you understand how the safari spectrum actually works. The spectrum runs from the crowded public parks to the private conservancies, and most tourists never know it exists because both ends of it produce photographs that look identical. Understanding the difference before you book is the single most valuable piece of Kenya research available. The public parks, Maasai Mara National Reserve, Amboseli National Park, Tsavo, are genuinely extraordinary places. The Mara ecosystem is one of the great wildlife areas on Earth, and the wildebeest migration, when over 1 million animals move between the Serengeti in Tanzania and the Mara in Kenya in search of grass, is the most significant terrestrial wildlife spectacle on the planet. These parks are managed by the Kenyan Wildlife Service, are open to all visitors at regulated fees, and form the backbone of the country's tourism economy. They are also, during peak season, subject to a vehicle density that changes the nature of the encounter. During the migration crossing, when the wildebeest cross the Mara River in their famous mass movements, sometimes hundreds at a time, predators waiting on both banks, it is not unusual to have 40 or 50 vehicles parked around a single crossing point, all positioning for the same photograph. The river crossing is still extraordinary. It's also surrounded by an automotive traffic jam. The leopard draped in a sausage tree that appears in every Kenya photograph is increasingly photographed from a surrounding ring of vehicles. The animals have habituated to the vehicles to a degree that doesn't obviously distress them, but the experience of the encounter changes when you're one of 50 vehicles, and when the cheetah you're watching periodically redirects its gaze from its hunting to the wall of diesel engines surrounding it. The private conservancies adjacent to the public parks, the Mara North Conservancy, Olare Motorogi, Naboisho, and others bordering the Mara ecosystem, the conservancies around Amboseli, The Laikipia Plateau Conservancies in the north operate on a different model. They are private land, often Maasai community land leased to conservation tourism operators, with vehicle numbers strictly controlled per area. In a conservancy, you may be one of 3 vehicles in the entire section you're driving, and those 3 vehicles agree not to crowd an animal simultaneously. The conservancy model also allows activities that the public parks prohibit: walking with a guide, night game drives, off-road driving to follow animals through the bush rather than staying on designated roads. The encounter with the ecosystem in a conservancy is closer to what the ecosystem actually is rather than what it looks like when presented as a spectacle. The conservancy model also directly benefits the communities that share the land with the wildlife. The Maasai communities that have historically coexisted with the great herds do so at real cost. Livestock predated by lions, crops trampled by elephants, movement restricted by conservation rules. The conservancy model compensates communities directly per acre of land dedicated to wildlife tourism, creating an economic incentive for conservation that competes with the alternative of converting the land to agriculture. Choosing a conservancy-based safari over a public park-only itinerary is not a luxury preference. It's a decision that determines who benefits from your visit. The conservancies cost more than the public parks, sometimes significantly more. This is a real constraint and worth acknowledging directly. The conservancy model is not accessible to every budget, and the public parks deliver genuine wildlife experiences worth having. But the choice between them should be made knowingly, understanding what each delivers, rather than defaulting to the public park because it's the option the standard tour package includes. The timing mistake in Kenya is the one most thoroughly covered in standard travel advice and the one most consistently misapplied. The wildebeest migration is the timing anchor for most Kenya itineraries, and the reason it's worth examining carefully is that migration season is not a fixed event on a fixed date. The migration is a continuous year-round movement of animals responding to rainfall and grass and the famous Mara river crossings. The most dramatic and most sought-after spectacle typically occur between July and October, with the peak of crossings usually in August and September, but varying significantly by year depending on the rains. Travelers who book July expecting to see crossings and arrive in a year when the migration moved later may find the main herd still in Tanzania. Travelers who book October and arrive in a year when the migration crossed early may find it already on the retreat south. This is not a reason to avoid timing around the migration. The October to July period outside the peak is still extraordinary wildlife country, and the resident predators of the Mara are present year-round regardless of the migration. But it's a reason to hold the specific expectation of river crossings loosely and to understand that the safari experience in the Mara has its own rhythms and that the migration is the most dramatic expression of those rhythms, not the only one. The dry seasons, June through October and January through February, are broadly the best times for wildlife viewing because the grass is short and the animals concentrate around water sources, making them more visible. The long rains of April and May and the short rains of November and December bring lush vegetation and more dispersed wildlife, but also dramatically lower tourist numbers and lower prices. The Maasai Mara in April, when the grass is long and the landscape is violently green and the vehicle numbers are a fraction of August. This is a completely different aesthetic experience from peak season, and some travelers actively prefer it. Nairobi requires honest treatment because the standard advice, spend the minimum time possible before getting to the bush, misses something worth correcting. Nairobi has a reputation that precedes it, and it's not a reputation that invites exploration. The city's security situation is real and requires the same urban awareness that any major African city demands. But Nairobi also has a quality of cultural life, a restaurant scene, a museum culture, and a specific East African urban energy that most transit visitors never access. The Nairobi National Museum contains the most significant collection of East African anthropological and archaeological artifacts in the region, including fossils from the Great Rift Valley that are central to the human evolutionary story. The Karen Blixen Museum, in the house where Out of Africa was set, is beautifully preserved and surprisingly moving. The Giraffe Center, 15 minutes from the city center, allows you to feed Rothschild giraffes, one of the most critically endangered giraffe subspecies, at arm's length from an elevated platform, in an experience that is simultaneously a conservation project and one of the more immediately joyful animal encounters available anywhere in Kenya. The food scene in Nairobi, particularly in the Westlands and Karen neighborhoods, has developed substantially in the last decade and reflects the city's role as the hub of East African business and culture, Kenyan, Ethiopian, Indian, and international kitchens operating at a level that surprises visitors expecting nothing between the airport and the savannah. 2 nights in Nairobi, taken seriously rather than endured, changes the transition from travel to safari in a way that one rush night does not. The altitude matters and is consistently underestimated. Nairobi sits at approximately 1,700 meters above sea level, and the air is noticeably thinner than sea level, not in the Cusco-level altitude sickness range, but enough to produce headaches and fatigue in some visitors who arrived fresh off a long-haul flight and immediately began being physically active. The first day should be slow, and it usually is as a matter of jet lag management anyway, which doubles as acclimatization whether you're thinking of it that way or not. The Swahili coast and the beach element of a Kenya trip is the thing most efficiently combined with the safari and most consistently rushed when it is. The coast around Diani Beach south of Mombasa and the Lamu archipelago in the north offer a completely different Kenya from the savannah. Swahili architecture, dhow sailing culture, coral reefs with excellent diving and snorkeling, the particular pace of a community whose history is built on the Indian Ocean trade routes rather than the East African interior. Lamu Old Town is a UNESCO World Heritage Site of astonishing completeness, a medieval Swahili city where cars are prohibited, donkeys do the heavy lifting, and the Arabic and African and Portuguese and British layers of the coast's history coexist in the architecture and the people and the food. 2 or 3 days here at the end of a safari creates a trip of genuine breadth rather than a single theme experience, and the domestic flight connections between Nairobi and Lamu make the logistics manageable without consuming transit days. The last mistake is about souvenirs and craft markets, and it's more consequential than it sounds. Kenya has a rich tradition of wood carving, beadwork, and textile crafts, much of it produced by Maasai and Kikuyu and Kamba communities. The tourist craft market circuit, Utamaduni, the curio market outside the National Museum, the stalls adjacent to every major hotel, sells genuine handcraft alongside mass-produced items that may have been made in China and finished in Kenya, at prices negotiated with tourists in a dynamic that benefits the market operator more than the artisan. The alternative is direct engagement with cooperatives and craft organizations that work directly with producers, the Kazuri Bead Women's Cooperative in Karen, which employs single mothers and women in vulnerable situations to produce handmade ceramic beads, the African Heritage Gallery, which deals directly with genuine traditional craft rather than the tourist curio version. These options require a small amount of research and return significantly more of the purchase price to the person who made the thing you're buying. What Kenya ultimately requires is a recalibration of the control instinct that most Western travelers don't know they're bringing into the bush. The ecosystem doesn't perform. The animals operate on the logic of survival, not of spectacle, and the greatest safari experiences happen at the intersection of genuine knowledge, a guide who reads the bush, and genuine presence, a traveler who is watching rather than waiting for the checklist to complete itself. The tourists who leave Kenya most permanently changed are the ones who arrived knowing they couldn't control what they would see and who therefore could actually see what was there. The ones who leave disappointed almost always brought a list they couldn't cross off fast enough. Kenya doesn't owe you the big five. It offers something larger than that, an encounter with an ecosystem that operated for millions of years before the tourist infrastructure was built around it, and that continues to operate with total indifference to the infrastructure. That indifference is not a problem to be solved. It's the whole point. The safari that taught you humility in the face of something genuinely wild is the one you'll still be thinking about years later, regardless of how many boxes you checked. Thanks for watching. If you found this useful, smash that like button and subscribe to When to Travel. We're all about helping you make smarter travel decisions. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And hey, if you think your friends need this, share it. Comment below with your next destination or your biggest travel question. I'm reading all of them. Let's go.